We're still here because we came as a newly married couple. Our children were born in Limassol when we were in Limassol area, and we have made it our home because we found living here so easy. It wasn't difficult to settle here. The people were very friendly. They were similar to our people, country people, and we just loved it.
We found our neighbours were very friendly. We loved the nature of the community, the way in which people related. Life was very straightforward. It was relatively inexpensive in 1970, compared even with UK at that time. But we have always felt comfortable in the community. It's like the old well-worn shoe that fits beautifully.
We're always busy. We wake up in the morning, walk at 6 o'clock, 4 kilometres each day, and we set ourselves tasks. So we're never sort of sitting around and wondering what to do. We have goals every day that we achieve because we're busy people.
The town was amazing in the way that it absorbed the refugees who came from the northern part of the island after 74. So many people were displaced and came to Limassol and the villages on the periphery of Limassol, and they were received so well and they were supported so well by the Limassolian.
The little country that we come from, a lot of people moved there and tried to take over. And as local people, we objected. So when we came to Cyprus, we were determined that we were not going to be like that. We were going to be part of the community and, integrate as much as we possibly could.
As an educator, I have always had enormous respect for the Cypriot family that absolutely, to use the phrase, works its socks off to give their children the best advantage in life. Mm-hmm. Whether that be local employment, whether it be education here, education abroad.
If I was in charge, well, I would like to have far more parking. There isn't enough parking. More green spaces would be very nice. And no more high-rise apartments.
People, stories, social issues, environment, sports, arts and culture, life, urban issues, innovation. This is the El Air Uncut.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are again in Limassol Ambassadors, the podcast in El Air Uncut channel where we talk about diversity, the positive side of it, because we want to promote all those elements, all those individuals that have been here for years, some of them decades, like my guests here today, and they love this island, they love Limassol, and that's why they are still here. So what else can we ask from a Limassol ambassador, someone that keeps promoting the city like Chris and Rob? Welcome. And thank you very much for coming all the way down here. So, first of all, how does it feel for you to be in Cyprus after so many years? I'll just reveal one element that I think it's historical in our podcast. The fact that you have been here since 1970. So nearly 54 years. Definitely you love this place, right? Tell us a little bit why you are still here.
We're still here because we came as a newly married couple. Our children were born in Limassol when we were in Limassol area, and we have made it our home because we found living here so easy and so similar to the little island that we both come from in the Irish Sea. So it was home from home. It wasn't difficult to settle here. The people were very friendly. They were similar to our people, country people, and we just loved it. we could not see any reason why we wouldn't stay. And my husband was very happy with his job. And it was a lovely place for children to grow up. A lovely, lovely island.
This was back then, and I think still today, majority of our guests, they mention that, how easy it is to raise their children here. What about you, Rob? How would you say, let's say, how do you describe the main reason why you are still here?
The community to us has always been wonderfully welcoming. We were very nervous in our early days because I was teaching in Lancashire. We came here for a 3-year period, and we were living in Limassol for our first year. And we found our neighbours were very friendly. Yes, the language difference was there, but remember, we were just 10 years after independence from the colonial administration, and a huge number of people were employed by that administration and had a very pro-British view of life. We loved the nature of the community, the way in which people related, the fact that the extended family was obviously very important, and life was very straightforward. It was relatively inexpensive in 1970, compared even with UK at that time. But we have always felt comfortable in the community. It's like the old well-worn shoe that fits beautifully. We just feel at home. And it is our home, and we have no intention of ever leaving.
Sounds really very well integrated for me. It's what everybody would love to say after 50 years in a different country. How would you say is it now for you? Because, okay, now you are retired, so it's not like before that you had to maybe finish that or the other task, and it would be sometimes difficult to find the right place, the right professional. Now you are 100% retired. How is it for you now?
Well, we've never really been retired, because once you do retire from the work that you had, you take on other activities. And we have a lovely house in the village, California, with lots of gardens. We grow fruit trees, and we're always busy. We wake up in the morning, walk at 6 o'clock, 4 kilometers each day, and we set ourselves tasks. So we're never sort of sitting around and wondering what to do. We have goals every day that we achieve because we're busy people.
Very good.
We're busy.
Very good sign. As long as you keep your brain properly structured and with a to-do list on a daily basis, it does help.
It does.
What about not going back home for you, for instance? What about not going back to your Isle of Man? You come from Isle of Man.
Yeah. Yes, we do. We're planning to go back next year. We don't go very often, but we never did. I don't know why, really. I think because we came to Cyprus, and it's an island like the Isle of Man, we never felt the urge to go. Our parents came to see us. Rob's parents came on one occasion, and my parents did. And then my father used to come every year after my mother passed away and spend the winter with us. So we never felt, and I'm an only child, and my husband's one of 2. So we didn't have an extended family that needed us, if you know what I mean. And our children were so happy here that in the holiday times we would stay.
So it means that your children as well, they settled here and they work and live here as well?
No, they are back in England,
okay.
But it's always home for them.
Okay.
They always think of Cyprus as home. In fact, our daughter, when she first left, used to say she was a Cypriot.
Right.
But yes, they identify with the island, very much so. But then I think you do when it's an island. I mean, we do identify with the Isle of Man, of course we do, and I'm always promoting the Isle of Man as well as we promote Cyprus when we go back to England. But yes, our children really love it here, and I don't know whether they'll ever come to live here eventually, but they had to go back to work.
All right.
And of course, they settled and married. And
Yeah, in terms of opportunities of work, things were not that easy back then when they started working. Things are very different now,
yes,
but even many children of Cypriots that are 100% Cypriots, once they went to do their studies in the UK or Germany or USA, some of them, quite a few of them, they stayed.
That's
They
right.
end up by establishing themselves somewhere else because of opportunities of
That's
certain careers. What about your side, your professional side? You have managed to stay in the same sort of spot here in Cyprus.
I think longer than any other member of staff. I came out as an assistant teacher, but the Open University started in UK in 1971, and we were able to gather qualifications through the Open University. So I did an ordinary degree and a master's degree in education, and that I think was enough proof to my employers that I was keeping myself up to date. So I stayed longer than I ever anticipated being able to stay. So professionally, I've enjoyed it, although being in the same school for such a long time, but it had particular appeal to me. The pupil population rotates because of the fact that service children are only on the island for 2 years or 3 years. Of course, there's a constant change within the school. And we always had some what were called non-entitled pupils. The first head boy I knew at St. John's was the son of an Israeli family. They were here helping to build the port of Limassol. And Yaakov was our first head boy that I knew. But we always had a small percentage of people other than the British servicemen, and that community has become much more mixed in itself now. And we became integrated into the sporting life of the island. We both played hockey. I was a hockey umpire. I trained most of the hockey umpires in Cyprus in the 80s and 90s. And we have some very good friends to this day who play that sport. I was also involved with Shakespeare at Curium. I was a set builder and prop manufacturer. And Chris gained employment in the local market. And we have got a lot of contacts, and we've got some close friends amongst the local community. So we haven't set ourselves apart. And in fact, some of the communities on the island where it's intensely British, we would avoid those.
yeah.
And we're much happier in our little village where we represent a very small minority, but we're accepted and where we can be as involved as we wish to be. So that's...
Wouldn't you, first Chris and then Rob, wouldn't you say that wherever we go, okay, your experience is Cyprus. I had the experience of 3 times settling in different countries, but I feel there is a like some sort of a standard that I could call it standard procedure to help us integrate better. And I would say it's this sort of balance between, yes, connect with those that speak our language and come from our own country, because sometimes, it's easier to ask this or that small information that you need for practical logistic reasons, but also kind of explore what else is there, among the locals that they are doing that might be not necessarily more developed or better than what I do, but it doesn't matter. It's different and it's interesting. Would you agree with this?
Yes, I would. And of course, they have the knowledge. And, living in this country, you need help with various things. And that's what they give you, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But we were never of the opinion of wanting to take over. We were happy to go along with the life here, because the little country that we come from, a lot of people move there and try to take over. And as local people, we objected. So when we came to Cyprus, we were determined that we were not going to be like that. We were going to be part of the community and, integrate as much as we possibly could. But that was difficult on the base because we were on the base, we lived there. Not so, on the 2 occasions we lived in Limassol, we did have sort of local families around us. But it's been easier in the village because we've had more time. We are, sort of amongst other people, not just British people, which we prefer.
What would you say about this, Rob?
Well, I think if you, the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. So many people that worked in Cyprus for the British government, either civilians like ourselves or military, have retained that link forever. It's left a mark on them. And that mark is the local community, the way the local community lives its life, the extended nature of the family, and the fact that people are so welcoming. I have a Facebook group of, they're mainly between 60 and 65, former students. And their site is called We Were So Lucky. And that because they came to Cyprus. And they still retain that love of Cyprus. They're all settled all over the place. But they have frequent meetings, and it's all about, the days when we were in Limassol, and the days when we did this and that as teenagers. But many of them then have bought property here. Our own 2 children, our son has in fact just sold his apartment, which was just off Grivas Tigenis in Limassol, because he wants to do a lot of work on his house in UK. Our daughter and her husband still have a property, which is in Aphrodite Hills, a 3-bedroom apartment, and they used to have a flat in Limassol before they bought that. They want that connection with the community, which was so important to them as they grew up, and in which they feel so happy, so content. And both our son and his family, and our daughter and her family, are coming to see us in the next 4 weeks. So the bond is there, and that bond is based on their experiences. The same as I said about these pensioners who now reminisce about their youth. It's based on their experiences and the love that grew out of that, both for each other, but for Limassol and its surroundings.
Yes.
I would like to bring in my own input on this one right now, because I think it's maybe stronger if it comes from a person who is not British. I'm not British, so there are very concrete data, very concrete facts that during the period of at least the 80s and the 90s that I witnessed, areas around Limassol and Paphos and Larnaca, everywhere, they were not developed at all in terms of real estate, and the businesses of developers, local developers, were very, very basic, and they gradually developed in such a way to the point that now we don't build small little houses anymore. We build, skyscrapers. But what made this change, what allowed this development, was precisely all these small, tiny little maisonettes that certain local developers were selling to exclusively British expats. And it's thanks to the British expats as well that you had hotels full with tourists, because there was like 92% of the tourism coming from the UK. And all this started because people were here precisely in the British bases. They liked it so much, they said, oh my God, I want to go back. In your case, you didn't even go back, you just stayed. So this, just to say that whatever the reason that brings people to the island, because in your case you had a position connected with the fact that there were British bases. The other nationality might be because their country is invaded.
Yes.
The other might be because their country is being, taken by whoever, is starting a war somewhere else, and everybody's running away by not being because they don't want to go and be a soldier killing other people next door. So there might be many different reasons for people to come down to this island, and specifically to Limassol that we are talking here. But the important is, what do you do after you are here? And in terms of British community, what I have seen in the 80s and 90s again, I saw a lot of British people that were either retired or still working, connected with the British bases, or a pub or somewhere connected with tourism, that they were developing things that they were non-existent. Like this or that sports club, this or that initiative, nature trails, sorry. I mean, so many different things. So I translate all this input as a positive impact. As long as there is mutual respect, it is positive to bring new ideas.
Absolutely, because you've had the Lions, haven't you, and the British Legion, and then there was the
Rotary.
The Rotary.
They were established here before, but they were reinforced by the expatriate community.
Yes, they were. Yes, and it's nice to have local input into these clubs, and with Rob with his masonry a lot. Again, it was the same sort of thing. It's good when you all get together, and they're not just solely for one type of person. That we don't like. We like to make sure that we integrate in that way.
Because I think at the end of the day, it's always better. I mean, it's like what you were saying before. The fact that there were some circumstances that at the time, it was 74, things became very complicated for those who were still on the island, and you had to go back to the British bases, as you said. Okay, these circumstances obviously affect people's lives and their own personal stories. But the important is also what you do after that. I mean, how do you pay back to the country? This, in my opinion, is what is important to exchange among all of us, all the different nationalities. It doesn't matter how complicated or uncomfortable things were. It's much more important what you do once you are here and you see people around you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. We're living in a much more cosmopolitan society than we ever experienced in the early days. Yes, we had a good mix of Greek and Turkish Cypriots. Sadly, post 63, 64, we had a lot of UN presence in Limassol. That's all gone now because it's not required anymore. But the town was amazing in the way that it absorbed the refugees who came from the northern part of the island after 74. So many people were displaced and came to Limassol and the villages on the periphery of Limassol, and they were received so well and they were supported so well by the Limassolians. And the community pulled together to get through this crisis, which was devastating for everybody on the island, but particularly, obviously, those driven from their homes in the north. And there was very little evidence of any discord between one community and another because they supported each other. They appreciated what was happening and they appreciated the need for support. And I think the word respect is something that I would use greatly about those days because people respected one another and understood. There was very much an empathetic view of people's circumstances and a desire to have them become a part of the community itself. Now, those from distant towns and villages still don't regard themselves as Limassolians. They're still Famagusta. All of the clubs were established, the Morphu Club and the Famagusta Club and the Caipirinha Club. They were all founded, but the feeling was one of unity and one of striving for success. And we saw some wonderful stories of success achieved by businesses that lost everything, re-established themselves and grew. And of course, everyone in a community has to respect or does respect that sort of recovery. And I think that's where the optimism came from. And it was partly responsible for the gradual growth of tourism. We used to say that all of the Limassol hotels said, we've got a beach and we've got the sun. We don't need to do anything else. But over the years, they realized that there is a bit more to running a tourist establishment than simply having the sun and the sea. And so there's no comparison to what they offer now compared to what they offered in the late 70s, early 80s, in their early days. So it's a very welcoming community and society. And our friends who come back and stay here, if they're fortunate enough to stay in the hotels, they thoroughly enjoy themselves.
Yeah, the standards there. I mean, Cyprus. There is even in terms of economic analysis, there is this phenomenon that is called for those years as the economic miracle, because it was an amazing, very fast recovery from losing their best resorts, tourist resorts, into building something that had to be in a hurry because they didn't want to lose their tourists that usually were coming to Famagusta and Caipirinha areas. So it was very, very difficult. And I have to say, when I first came to Cyprus, the majority of Cypriots, they had 2 jobs, not one.
Oh, yes.
2 jobs, because it was not enough to have one job and be able to provide for their families. And it was very, very hard times. But I never heard them, because I also speak Greek and I listen to what they say. I never heard them complaining about the British this or the British that, because somehow there was this sort of when you know the face of a person. I'll never forget this. I met one day one lady from Finland, and we became friends. And then after a few months, she told me, "You know what? When I'm listening to the to the news, watching news wherever, I've never paid attention to Portugal. Whenever they talk about Portugal or Lisbon, and for me it meant nothing. So I was never paying attention to the news from that country. But now that I know you, each time they talk about Portugal and each time she's on the BBC all the time, I always pay attention." And this is a very good example. Yes. When you don't know one person, when you have zero connection with that specific nationality, it's so much easier to just, put like a curtain and
of course.
It's there, but you don't really pay attention.
Right.
And I think that this is a very important thing for Cypriots, is the fact that they always had a very good connection with British, because they know the faces. They know, this is Rob, this is Chris. So they don't see you as the nationality. They see you as Chris and Rob. And this allows a different sort of connection. And I'm sure it's the same thing from your side, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Definitely, yes. And we have some characters. We've known some characters in the village. And in fact, our village had a wonderful idea. 3 years ago, they started to publish a calendar based on very old photographs of people in the village. Now, we have known most of the last 2 years when we first arrived in the village. And these characters were so well known to us. We may not have been able to communicate, and we didn't necessarily spend a lot of time together, but we respected each other. And there was always a smile for one another. And it makes all of the difference if the warmth is in the community.
Yeah.
And again, I mentioned respect, and you mentioned the multiplicity of tasks that people gave themselves, the work that they did. As an educator, I have always had enormous respect for the Cypriot family that absolutely, to use the phrase, works its socks off to give their children the best advantage in life,
Mm-hmm.
whether that be local employment, whether it be education here, education abroad. Obviously, tertiary education has grown enormously in Cyprus. We now have some very well-respected places for them to study here. But in our early days, most of these young people were funded by their families to universities, as you say, from America to anywhere in Europe to Britain. And you can't but admire that, because it's not a characteristic that our country had, because our education came free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the respect that they earned simply by their determination for their youngsters to do better than they had done. That was always wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree entirely. I would say that from the very beginning, when I realized, again, by knowing stories, by knowing personally this or that family, and I heard from cases where the mother had never worked before, and just to be able to pay her children studies in UK, she started working in somewhere in a hotel, in
That's
a
right.
restaurant, and it was really moving sometimes to see how much they did in order to be able to give their children a different education.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I have to say that there you had the moment where the children would pay back that sort of effort by the majority coming back.
Yes.
Something that not many countries can say, because a lot of countries, they just go abroad, study, and they stay there.
That's
the majority doesn't come back. In Cyprus, the majority came back.
Yes,
and this
they
is
do.
why today we have so much development. Otherwise, the development would be like many other Greek islands where things are beautiful, but just tourist resort, nothing else. Right?
That's right.
And this is, I would say, what about you as a community, let's say in terms of British community, how big were you at the time that you were living in Limassol? How many British around approximately?
In 1970, in 74, when everything changed markedly, there were well over 20,000 British service personnel, civilians, and families living in Limassol.
20,000 back
Yes.
then.
And the population of Limassol was much smaller than it is today.
Of course.
When we look from the hills down on today's Limassol, it's vast. It stretches such a length of the coastline, and it was much smaller in those days. And that expansion has sort of, all right, it spread along the coast, but it's now starting to spread up into the villages, sadly, because living in Limassol is so expensive that people are moving out of town. But again, it's helping those communities.
Yeah.
Because the building that's taking place and the employment that comes from all this building that's taking place is beneficial. It is beneficial. But the community was huge. Obviously, that all came to an end in 74. Numbers reduced greatly, but there are still a lot of British people enjoying living in Cyprus.
All over Cyprus, do you have any idea of amounts at the moment? Because I know for a fact that Paphos at some point, it was the biggest, let's say, amount of British in one area.
In one area.
Yeah,
In
wasn't it?
I think.
Peya, yes.
Peya in particular.
And there's a very funny story about Peya that I'm going to share with you, which is there was a time where, Cypriots, they were saying in Paphos that, most probably, we will not need a long time to see candidate for mayor in Peya, because the majority was British, was not Cypriot. It was the majority was British. But there, I have to say that the British community has shown what you have just mentioned through different stories, the respect for the fact that even though the amount, so in terms of numbers, it would maybe justify to have a candidate, a British candidate to be mayor. It never happened. Because I think this is exactly the proof of what you have been saying. The fact that you are in a country that you love, you respect, but you understand as well that
We're just guests.
this
in the
this
country.
is not up to the point where you would like to be part of. Now, in Europe, now the tendency is exactly the opposite. Or not even Europe, even in Britain. I mean, you have a prime minister, had a prime minister that it's one of the communities that came as immigrants. So, I mean, now these things are different. The idea of having diversity, it means as well that you have to have a certain number of representatives at government, municipality, that are elements from those communities. How do you see that happening in Cyprus? Would you see that happening in Cyprus? Would you?
I'm sure it will happen in Cyprus. It happened in our country, didn't
Yes.
it?
Yes, but that was tiny.
But that was tiny. But I think it will eventually because of the numbers of people that you have here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the large conurbations here that we have in UK. You don't have this concentration. Paya, yes, it was very heavily British, but it is a very small area. I think if you had a similar development in Nicosia or in Limassol or in Larnaca, then there might be some representation coming forth. There was a very successful lady who was on the council in Paya, and I've forgotten her name now, but she was quite a voice for a number of years. But most of us take the point, as Chris has just said, that we are guests, but we're participant guests, if you like. We're active guests. We have not taken Cyprus nationality, Cypriot nationality. We have our residency, and we're quite confident that that will be respected, so that we don't feel in any way afraid that somehow we'll be disenfranchised and shown the door. So we feel that we are a part of the society, and at the lowest level, in our sports clubs, in our activities, in the things that we've done within the community, we are active and we do take part and we do express our opinions. But we're not going to elevate that to the world of politics. No. We're happy to do it within a community or a club or an activity. We used to ramble, and there was a lot of talk then about this is wrong and that's wrong, and this, blah, blah, blah. But we didn't do anything active about it. We simply accepted that this is the way life is.
Yeah. I think that it's the dimension, as you very well said. I mean, even Cyprus being as a country, not complete country, occupied country. So even the side that is not occupied is still very small, maybe, to reach that level of having someone that is from a different community to look for representation in the parliament. But in the parliament here, we have representations from Maronites and from Latins. So, I mean, there is catering for this sort of potential development, but I think it's very important to become active. It doesn't mean that you look for a position, but as you very well said, I mean, you are active as citizens, as people that live on the ground. So if you live in Kalochorio, you will be active in Kalochorio. If you are in Limassol, in Limassol. What would you suggest as active citizens and brains that never stop thinking? What would you suggest as the next, let's say, 3 important measures for Limassol if you were the person in charge of Limassol? Yeah.
Well, I would like to have far more parking. There isn't enough parking. More green spaces would be very nice. And no more high-rise apartments.
All right.
personally.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Very clear. What about you, Rob?
I think we share those three.
We do.
The high-rise apartments are just slowly but surely changing the character of the town. It's a different representation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is wonderful to walk into this part of town, into the old part of Limassol, and to see some of the old buildings which have been beautifully restored or have been beautifully converted to modern living rather than the traditional approach. But what would I like to see in Limassol? I think the whole business of getting about town is becoming difficult. And I think whilst the bus service appears to have expanded considerably, it's still restricted in destination, shall we say, in that it tends to go to a central point and then you must make your own way from there. And I think there could be improvements in public transportation that might ease some of the congestion, which we're all now taking for granted. We used to travel from Galahorio into the centre of Limassol, and we would say 30 minutes. We have to allow 45 now.
45 minutes.
Because the congestion as we reach the periphery of the town is so great. And we have a choice of about 5 routes into town.
Yes, we're lucky.
But all of them will be busy because of the high traffic density. And it brings a degree of conflict that wasn't present in the old days. Now the
more stress, more aggressive
stress, bit of road rage here or there, and so improved communications in terms of people's ability to move around the town would make a considerable difference. But we appreciate just how difficult that is in an already developed area.
You can't.
No, you can't stretch it all out and make the space.
Streets, yes,
no,
but there are other ways. There are other ways because all cities, if you go back, I think it's always very important to see what happened elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And all cities, they had same issues. First is the fact that, it spreads. That's the only way, right? And then the other big problem is that the old town of all the towns, old town, downtown, it's always narrow streets.
Yeah.
So like in Lisbon, we had same problem, and you just have so many one-ways, which is sometimes annoying, but it is better.
Yes, that's right.
It is better. One-ways, and if you come to a point where you find your own itinerary to get there.
Absolutely.
But fortunately, now you have apps, applications. It's not easy, but it's feasible. It's feasible, but we need some creativity, and we need as well to go and take some ideas from other places, other cities that went through the same challenges before. What about, and this is going to be my last point, what about you as, you're very young, don't take me wrong, but your new needs as, let's say, a little bit
as
mature citizens, because it's very specific. I know this from my parents as well. So, there are certain needs that after a certain age, you would like to see things more, let's say, flexible in terms of having access maybe to a doctor in a moment of emergency, having maybe better connections in order to take some, medication from a pharmacy. During COVID, it was a nightmare to be far away. So do you have anything specific that you feel that would be your new type of needs for, let's say, the aging population? It will not be just for you, but for everybody else. For me, in a few years.
Well, because of where we're living, we're very fortunate to be in the country with lovely clean air. And as far as we're concerned, the most important thing is exercise and walking when you get to our age. And during COVID, that's what we did. We created a gym in our house, and we walked every single day. We had our goals every day, and we've kept that up. And that's what's kept us fit. And I think, yes, no, we don't worry about being near a doctor. As long as we feel we are fit and healthy, then that's okay. If we had problems, maybe we would think about, maybe we should be near a hospital. But no, we are quite capable of looking after ourselves and making sure that we stay as fit as possible.
We've seen a transformation, really, in that in our early days, and still in many parts of the land, the extended family cares for the elderly.
Yeah.
Just as in reverse, they care for the infants.
Yeah.
That still works very happily in many areas, but in some cases, they're very much dependent now upon those coming from abroad as carers.
Yeah.
And the actual care sector for elderly people is very restricted. And from what we have seen in some cases, very questionable in terms of the quality of life that it provides for those people being cared for.
Yeah.
So that is a huge area for development. But I mean, one of the wonderful things we haven't celebrated is GESI. The health system which Cyprus has introduced is absolutely astonishing, really, to have made the strides it's made in such a short period of time and to provide the standard of care that it does, that we feel absolutely confident that we will be looked after, that the system will care for us. But there does need to be a development of care for the elderly that allows them to retain their respect and to have a space and to have the ability to carry on any activities which they still wish to carry on. And I think that's in its infancy, and that will develop. But we've seen so many changes in the hospitals, the clinics, in Cyprus, that I'm just staggered by what's been achieved, to be honest.
Very good to hear. Very good to hear. I think that most of the countries nowadays, all over Europe, they are exactly on the other end of the story.
Yes.
They are overwhelmed and they are struggling to offer the level of service that we still get here in Cyprus. So let's hope that we can manage to keep it for as long as possible, because it is a system that it can, if not properly managed, it can, you know that from NHS in UK, which was like an amazing mechanism. Everybody wanted to copy the NHS, and now everybody's struggling at the NHS to be able to get the service that you should be entitled to have, because you pay for it, right? All your lives with taxes. So I think it's the bottom line is, I agree with you, is that the care system for elderly people, it's at its infancy. I like the way you said it, because there is still a lot to be done. A lot to be done.
I mean, one thing you have to do if you come to live in Cyprus, you're leaving your families, so you have to look after yourself.
Yeah.
We don't have, as they have in Cyprus, the extended family. Our children being able to care for us. So we have to make sure that we look after ourselves, to keep ourselves as fit as possible, so we don't have this problem. That's the thing.
But even there, I mean, you are very well organized. I know this because I had, unfortunately, a friend of mine that had difficulties. It was 91-year-old. In Paphos, and just because we had the situation, we discovered that there are so many services, again, organized by the British community there, that goes home and looks after the person that is home completely alone, and they would go home and cook for them and clean the house and bathe him and all that, and I was amazed. So somehow the communities they kind of become the extended family.
They do.
They
If
do.
you are,
They do.
which is what
Yeah.
how it was with us when we first came to Cyprus and we had our children. I didn't have my mother with me to help me, and our friends from the school, they became our children's uncles and aunts. That's how it works. If you're in a community that is small. But if you are dotted around the place, you don't have a community.
Yes.
You have your Cypriot friends, they have their families and everything else, but they are very good to look in and look after you. They are good.
They'll keep an eye on you.
They will keep an eye on you.
If you don't come out one day, they will knock at your door and say, "What's happening? Are you okay?"
That's right. Yes,
That's a good thing
because
in
they
a
are
village.
Plenty of evidence.
Yes,
of that.
because they're village people. It's the same in the Isle of Man, isn't it? They're curious.
Yeah.
We're curious people.
Yeah. I mean,
and more
we have
curious.
to be honest. I mean, there's nothing happening in the village, so we might as well look at what is happening in someone else's house.
I think you get that more in a small community than you do in cities. In London, for instance, if you never saw your next door neighbour, you wouldn't bother to go and knock. But here, on an island where people are used to having this sort of mentality and that everybody's together in Cyprus as in the Isle of Man, we look after people. But not in cities, they don't. And it's a shame, but we're lucky here that does actually happen.
I'm so happy to see you so happy.
Well, honestly,
Yes,
I can
it's
honestly
so-
say that, there aren't many days when we don't wake up and say, oh, it's a lovely day, aren't we so lucky? We say, aren't we so lucky? We don't take it for granted. We are lucky that the decisions we have made, we are still here in this lovely island. And I think that's so important.
Beautiful words.
I really
Chris.
do.
Well, you are definitely a good ambassador. If you promote Cyprus like that, I think you should be promoted to Cyprus ambassador. I'm going to ask you last question here to just put your pin on a spot that you would suggest newcomers to go and visit because you have something to say about it and you consider it to be a good, interesting spot to discover.
I'll put that there.
And that spot is?
Galahorio.
So you
Our
are here
village.
to promote your village.
Our village,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
And what would I be able to do there if I go there?
Oh, what could you do? Well, there's a lovely lady that makes candles. She makes soaps. She has a workshop. And so she promotes all of that. Right, and she's going to get something up and running. Well, she has already. I've been to 2 of her classes. And there's a winery there for Commander Rear. We have a lovely olive press. It's interesting. It's a nice little village, really, and lovely walks. Fabulous walks all in the mountains, really, honestly.
Well, Galahorio then. Okay.
Galahorio.
What about Rob? What
Well,
would you suggest?
I'm going to put this simply because of history. I'm going to put it where I worked for so many years.
All right.
Now, Curium obviously is very adjacent.
So close to
all
Horium,
of the
Akrotiri.
history
Yeah.
contained within Curium and the beach. But just that coastline is so dramatically beautiful. We play golf on a little golf course there, which is on the base, sadly, but it's beautiful, beautiful cliffs. And no matter how poor the golf is, the surroundings are wonderful.
Yes, that's.
And that is
And the
uplifting.
wildlife.
That's uplifting in itself.
And the wildlife.
I know the feeling. Well, thank you so much, Chris and Rob, for coming all the way
Not
here.
at all.
It was really a pleasure to see smiley faces after 54 years in Cyprus, and still so happy with your choices.
Yes, we are.
I'm sure that all of us, from whatever nationality we are, we hope to reach that age and be able to say the same. So you are definitely a good example of mutual respect. And as a foreigner, I would like once more to say well done. And let's pass it on to everyone.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Try to
Thank you.
stay in the
Relatively
shade.
cool.
Yes. And I would like to say thank you to all our listeners and our viewers. And till next week, when we will bring another face of diversity so that we get to know who we are, the internationals in Limassol and Limassol ambassadors. Thank you very much. Till next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the El Air Uncut.